I kind of been on record at a lot of entrepreneurial events saying, hey, entrepreneurs, you can do this on your own. You don't need to raise money. And I found myself eating my words a little bit, because in a lot of cases, you do need to raise money to kind of get to the next level. So we're a little bit past halfway through our $1.5 million round that we're raising from angel investors. And then the third challenge that we're kind of experiencing now is to really undergo organizational change in our company to be able to kind of roll out this software platform. So all of these things, kind of when you look at it from afar, it looks like, man, you know, Microsoft, YouTube, all of these things seem like they had such an easy path to success, but there's a whole backstory there that's always really kind of fascinating, that you can learn a lot from your own kind of entrepreneurial experience. And one of the things that I learned a month ago when I was at the Inc. 500 conference, how many of you listened to Pandora on your, about 2/3 of the room. Well, one of the speakers there was the founder of Pandora, Tim Westergren, and he started Pandora about, I think 10 or 11 years ago. And about 8 years ago, they hadn't kind of tweaked the product and the business model in a way that was even close to being monetized. And they ran out of money, and they literally had 50 employees work, I think, you know, part-time or 2/3 time for free for 2.5 years. And that kind of dedication got them to the point to where today they have 63 million users, and they'll do 100 million in advertising revenue. And he made those employees whole after 2.5 years by raising money and convincing the venture capitalists to kind of back pay $2.5 million worth of salary to those employees. So again, every company has its own story, and one of the key takeaways to all of this is that, you know, the challenges that you face in the entrepreneurial process, 90% of it is just perseverance, is sticking with it, making slight tweaks to the business model, but persevering through all of it, and eventually success does happen. So turn it over to John for a little bit.
When I was growing up, my mom used to say 3 things to me every night when I was going to bed. One, she'd say, don't worry, you'll eventually be as big as your brothers. 2, she'd say, you know, my dad and you believe in God, but eventually you have to make your own decisions there. And then she said, you know, in the early 21st century, SaaS computing, cloud computing, and the internet will completely drive innovation to the next level. And so I thought the first one was really poignant, and the last one was scary. No, I'm just kidding. She didn't say any of those things. But the point is that really, my mom's an amazing person, and I wish she were here. She's alive, but she's just up in Salem. So when we were asked to talk today, we were told to say a little bit about our background to give you context. So in 30 seconds, I'll tell you a little bit about my background and the truth behind it. So in 2000, my brother and I started a company called Wired.md, and we made healthcare videos to educate you and I as patients in the exam room. And so we set up the first wireless networks forever, actually, in the state of Oregon at hospitals, and we played our videos for you and I to learn about our diseases and procedures that we were about to undergo. Fast forward 7 years later, we sold the company for $7.5 million to a company on the East Coast called Media. My brother still runs it. It's a multi-million-dollar company, and it generates crazy amounts of profit. The real reason for starting that business is I just wanted more acceptance by my eldest brother, who I thought was the shining light in the family. Wow. Okay, so that's the joke, but the point is there's always a purpose behind every business. In that business, it was about trying to educate underserved patient populations, Spanish-speaking patient populations, undereducated men and women who go into the doctor and don't know how to get the information they need to get. So that was the purpose of that one. I took the cash from that and started Journey Gym, which is that expensive piece of plastic laying on the floor there. Looks so awesome on its side. And the purpose of that business is to help you and I get in a little bit of workout every single day. So these phones and our laptops help us get a little bit of work in wherever we are, whenever we need. The idea there is that that does the same. The reason I started that business is because I just wanted a reason to see my wife in not sweatpants. Wow. All right, so in between those two businesses, Ryan and I, like he said, we're a part of this group called Startups. It's still around. And basically the whole idea there, like you said, was a tough love group of founders of companies. And fast forward 10 years, and to date we have an 85% success rate amongst our members. 2/3 are profitable, 4 acquisitions, 3 Inc. 500 companies, including these two gentlemen's companies right here. But again, the purpose behind that really was to make a network of friends, I think, basically, right? And through the process of startups, I'll use that as the base today, we learned about innovation, I think, at its core, and that's what I'd like to speak to. So that's the background. I thought I was going to get more laughs, but it doesn't matter. The point is that I told you it as we were asked to. So if you're not taking notes today, I'm going to text these out later. There's a site, crappy notes off my phone.net, that I'll be sending these out via. The .com was taken. But I think there's 3 key messages here around entrepreneurship that I'd like to discuss in the next 10 minutes. So they include this if you're taking notes. Number 1, you have to have a disruptive model. To me, that is at its core innovation. Number 2 is founder perseverance, which Ryan touched heavily upon. And then last but not least is peer mentoring as a base. So let's go through each one of those, if we can, in greater detail. Disruption/innovation, synonyms for one another. There's a guy up in Portland, Oregon named Thomas Thurston who also worked at Intel like Ryan, and he studied 94 entrepreneurial, venture-backed companies that came out of Intel, 94. He studied them back as far back as the data went when Intel started tracking their investments. What he found out is that by looking at a single-page description of a business, he could tell you whether or not, with over an 85% accuracy, whether or not that company would be successful and have an exit. Unfortunately, amongst those 94 Intel companies, 91 had gone out of business. There were 3 that were left, and none of them had had an exit. But he used that as the base for which to understand disruption technology. And now he goes all around the state and talks about it, and we've actually heard him speak 3 times now, and I'm a huge believer in this, which is that disruptive models is truly the core of innovation. And so disruption, as it's truly defined, is either one of 2 things. You either have the cheapest, least feature-rich solution that you bring to the market, i.e. if you're, let's say, High-Rise as a customer relationship management software, it's the cheapest, least feature-rich going at Salesforce, or you're launching a brand new market completely, Red Bull in energy drinks 10 years ago. Those are the 2 forms of disruption. And the reason I bring it up and why I think it's so important to today is because that is truly what is at the core of innovation. If you do those, either one of those 2 models, your likelihood of success is exponentially better than if you don't do those things. As you guys all know, there's been tires invented that won't pop, okay? There have been a number of inventions that should be used by all of us every day. But the reason they haven't been is they haven't been truly disruptive. They have not been able to stay in business long enough to either get market acceptance, market traction, investor support, or the customer base to offset the big guys. So again, you've got to either be a new market entrant, such as Red Bull, or you have to have the cheapest, least feature-rich solution. So that is at the core of the disruptive model, and I think it's mission critical because the last thing that Thomas Thurston speaks about is he can actually teach people how to do this. He can actually have you sit down, and within students that he's worked with within the MBA programs, he can actually have someone who's at about a 50% accuracy, right? Yes or no, this company will succeed after an hour of training. After a couple weeks of training, 65%. After 6 months of training, he'll get you close to where he's at, about 80%. 1 page, description of a business, doesn't say anything about the team, the addressable market, doesn't talk about any of this stuff. But when Ryan and I sit down, or Brian sits down and we raise money, those are the 3 big questions we get. Who's the team? What's the total addressable market? What are the differentiators? And guess what his research found out? None of that mattered. Actually, the opposite. The more veteran-based the team was, and not veterans in the context of today, but the more veteran-based the team was, it was just simply longer till they failed. They didn't have a greater likelihood of success. The total addressable market, completely irrelevant. There's not a single market. You can sell sweatshirts made out of female alpacas that only live in Southern California, and there's like a multi-million-dollar market for that. And then the last piece is this whole idea of what's the differentiation? Well, all that the differentiation is either that I'm cheaper and least feature rich and I'm going to slowly gain market share, or I've got something that no one's ever had before, both of which, honestly, are the true forms of innovation. So I'll start with that, and that's the base, which I think we need to discuss the rest of today. The second part, which I said after disruptive model, okay, is founder perseverance. So if you're sitting there and you think you've got this amazing opportunity, right, and you've got the next category of product, or you've got the least feature-rich, least expensive solution, then you have to decide, are you going to start a company? And if you decide you're going to start a company, I think there's nothing more important than what Ryan said, which is founder perseverance. What we've found in our group is that the reason 85% of our companies have stayed in business is simply because of positive peer pressure. If you look at the national average based on the Department of Commerce, there is a 40% failure rate in startups within 1 year, an 80% failure rate within 5 years, and every year thereafter about 2% of startups fail. So in 10 years, you're looking at about an 86 to 80% failure rate, 100% failure, no cash out, nothing. We have the exact opposite, and I'm not saying that to pat ourselves on the back. I'm saying that because it's very simple. If you're around people who are doing what you're doing, and they say, listen, I'm not going to fail, and I'm here to help you, and I have no ulterior motives whatsoever, you're likely going to feel the pressure, the positive peer pressure to stay in business. With that being stated, I think it's really, really important that we get a better sense of what that means. I mean, what is peer pressure in a positive sense? And it's interesting because what we've found is that if you don't start a company with another co-founder, your likelihood of ever passing $500,000 is almost zero. That's been amongst 47 member companies we've had to date. The reason that is because this is hard. It's just like anything. It's, why do you have a life partner? Why do you have friends when you go out? I mean, all of these things lead to the same thing. It's about having a relationship, and a relationship where you can basically commiserate as well as, like we've talked about before, collaborate. And so if you don't have a co-founder, the likelihood of success is very, very low. Next after that, what we talk about is basically the founder perseverance in relationship to what it means for the company. If you're a co-founder, you are the brand. And this is really, really critical because when you go out there and you talk about innovation, I'm sorry to say it, but the most innovative companies that you and I think of, Apple, for example, are completely dependent on the founder. I mean, you look at Apple's history when they had 3 CEOs between when Steve Jobs left and came back, and the difference is night and day. I mean, as you guys know, in Q1 of this year, they surpassed Microsoft as essentially the largest software company in the world, both with hard and soft goods. And that never would have happened without Steve Jobs. You think of Virgin Atlantic, right? And you think of Richard Branson. I mean, these are obviously very cliche, very big examples. But the truth of the matter is that's who you are, and that's who the company is. There is no question that if Ryan left the ROI, it could very likely implode within 12 months. It's not that he hasn't built a great operationally based business, but that's the truth of the matter. So if you want to truly innovate, I think what you have to do is you have to say, listen, I've got something disruptive. I'm going to find someone to get this out on the streets with me, and I'm going to stay to the very end. This whole notion that you shouldn't be CEO is totally BS in my mind. You really need to stick with it and believe that there's no one better suited in the world to do this than you. And by the way, no one's going to come up and compete with you, including the big guys out at Intel. And sorry, I know there's some Intel people in the crowd, but the reality is that they have the lowest statistical likelihood of actually being successful when they basically go up against a startup. And that's why it's the buy versus build model. Next after that, within the group, and what we found in peer mentoring is success has to be the model. The moment that you start talking about plan B, if this thing doesn't work out, I can always get my job back or move in with my parents, which in my case, you guys know I obviously have, maternal issues. The point is it's not an option. You think about power of intention, the beauty of the movie The Secret, right? And it was the best-selling internet-based movie of all time, and they were on Oprah 3 times after that and blew up their distribution even further. This whole notion of the power of intention, the power of law of attraction is absolutely true whether you believe it to be or not.